Hey there, fellow business owner. When it comes to keeping your financial head above water, BANE is an incredibly important number. Now, I'm sure that you're just making a boatload of cash and you never have any cash flow issues. So maybe this presentation does not apply to you. But I'll tell you what, even though I've been in the entrepreneurial game for many years now, there's still times where I'm looking down the road and I'm going, ooh, that could be a bit of troubled water as far as cash flow is concerned and or just generally cash on hand. And so I kind of asked myself, what is it that I watch in my financials that lets me sleep at night? Well, I'll tell you what. The term that I've discovered is BANE, and let me explain how BANE can help you keep your head above water financially, especially in those times where you're just really pursuing aggressive growth and or you're really bootstrapping along the way. So what is BANE? It's really it answers the question, how much financial breathing room do we have? It's for me it's my sleep easy at night number. It's a measure of very short term, very small picture company health. It's like even it's even shorter term and more small term than looking at current assets versus current liabilities. And if you don't know what that means, that's okay. You'll understand quickly later on in this presentation. Now, technically, BANE stands for Bank Accounts Net Equity. Bank Accounts Net Equity. If that also sounds kind of accountant gibberishy, no problem. It all makes sense later. Now, you've probably seen the movie The Dark Knight Rises with Batman. And in the movie, there's this totally psycho villain named Bane. And what a badass. Look at this dude. He's like this uber villain. He's an absolute tank of a dude. Although he kind of has this crab on his face, which is a little funny. It looks terrifying though. And it's kind of fitting that he has a tough time breathing and needs this thing on his face because, like, literally, I look at it as how much breathing room do we have in this company. So, completely changing gears, we're going to look at this gay pride triangle. Actually, no, I'm just kidding. It's actually Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I'm sure that you've heard of this before. You probably saw it in college or university or maybe high school psychology class. And it simply explains that in life, we do not care about anything that's higher up the pyramid if we have not satisfied the lower levels below it. So, for example, if you cannot breathe, you really do not care if you have friends. Likewise, if you're like in my home city, which is Edmonton, Canada, where it gets to being minus 20 Fahrenheit or minus 30 Celsius, like extreme deep cold in like February, then, I mean, if you were shivering on the sidewalk with no clothes, like minutes away from hypothermia and death, you don't really care if you won a trophy in the local golf tournament, right? So, nor do you care about the safety. Like, did somebody steal my bike? I don't care because I'm about to die. So, there's really this Maslow's hierarchy of needs of business. So, when we look at business, the priorities, believe it or not, actually very much resemble a triangle. So, long-term wealth and getting super crazy rich. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, particularly my former self, have thought about, wow, this business is going to be this amazing vehicle to be like fulfilling all these huge dreams, and I'm going to have this incredibly abundant lifestyle. It's just going to be super amazing. And you know what? All that doesn't really matter if I don't have enough of a team around me to go and make that happen. I don't know of anybody who's ever become incredibly wealthy by doing it alone. Like, business is a team sport, life is a team sport, and we got to give enough incentives to those that we want to take the journey with us to keep them on board, or else we never will have that really big, exciting company that, and I mean, whatever big and exciting means to you. Maybe that's $1,000,000, maybe that's $10,000,000, maybe it's $100,000,000. But the point is that doesn't happen unless you have enough of the right short-term incentives for those around you. And that might mean bonuses, that might mean other forms of incentives like trips or special perks. It could mean any number of things. Now, you know what? That actually doesn't matter if you do not have everyday stability. I promise you 99.999% of people will actually prefer to have a job than have a bonus. There can be no bonus if there is no job. It makes no sense for somebody to get a bonus today and get laid off tomorrow because the company ran out of money. It just doesn't make any sense. So everyday stability is absolutely crucial. And I can really think, I read a book called The Great Game of Business. And when I read this idea in there, it totally resonated for me because for years and years and years, all I've been focused on is just growing the company, growing the company, growing the company. And you know what? Stability, it was kind of like, well, we'll deal with that next year, next year, next year, next year. And here we are like 7 years later, and stability only now is starting to become, a priority on my radar. And I believe that I can grow the company quite aggressively while still having a measure of stability. I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. So how do we achieve stability? Well, okay. This is a very quick little bit of accounting 101. If you already know this, then please just bear with me for like 2 to 3 minutes here. So what you see in front of you is the beginning of a balance sheet, one of the all crucial elements of financial statements. And on the left side, we have what we own with an N, and on the right, we have what we owe with an E. And when we take a look at examples of assets, which is what we own, there's the money in your pocket, there's the cash in your checking account, your house, your car, in your business, maybe you've got some equipment, right? Or maybe you own some property like, an office or something. These are all assets that you own with an N. Now, we also have the liabilities, and that's where we owe money. Like we owe money on a credit card or a line of credit or a mortgage or a car loan, or if you have some kind of a promissory note or a bond that you've taken out, like a loan of sorts with an investor, that's also a liability. So from there, generally speaking, the more that we own as far as assets compared to what we owe, the more stability that we have. So if you just think about it, if you got a lot of cash in your pocket, let's say you got 10 grand and you've only got $1,000 on a credit card, you got 10,000 is far greater than 1,000. That sounds pretty stable. Whereas just the opposite, if you had $1,000 in your pocket but $10,000 on a credit card, that is a pretty precarious situation to be in. Now also understand that there's a big difference between short-term and long-term assets and liabilities. If you have a house that is worth, I don't know, 300K or 500, whatever the amount is, then congratulations, that's fantastic. But if you have a credit card that has that 10K of debt on it, but only 1K over here cash in your pocket, how are you going to pay off that credit card? Well, you could just not pay it off and get dinged like 19% interest. That's pretty hard on the cash flow. So just because a person might have, say, $301,000 of assets, when you put it together, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are liquid enough to be able to cover their short-term liabilities. So short-term versus long-term, we also have to keep in mind, because not all assets are the same as each other and not all liabilities are the same as each other either. So what is equity? Well, we've heard this term before. By definition, equity is simply assets minus liabilities. Equity is usually all assets minus all liabilities, although if we start looking at different time frames, again, if we start looking at short-term versus long-term, we could look at short-term equity or long-term equity. When we are thinking of equity, we oftentimes hear about a house, home equity. And when we hear about that, all we have to do is take the value of the house. So let's say it's $300,000 again, or $500,000, whatever the number is. And if the mortgage has 150 on it, that means we have 150 of equity. 300 minus 150 is 150 worth of equity. Another example that we always hear about is a car. So how much equity do you have in your car? Well, if it's a $20,000 value on the car, like the street value, you could sell it for us 20 grand, and you've got $5,000 sitting in a car loan that you still owe on it, then you have $15,000 of equity. Equity is also typically known as net worth. I think we see the term equity more when we talk about business, and we see net worth used more when we're talking about personal. It's rare that you hear someone say, oh, my personal equity is, that's a little confusing, but if they say my personal net worth is, all of a sudden that makes sense. Just a silly nuance, I guess. So now, when we take a look at short term, I mean, really, by definition in accounting, when we talk about what's called current assets, we're talking about any kind of asset that can be converted to cash in a 1-year term. And so that can include cash, that can include accounts receivable, right? Other people who owe us money. Usually you can collect on that within the next year, ideally in the next like 30 days. If you have any kind of short-term investments or bonds or anything that's convertible in the short term, if you had stock that you could sell really quickly, these are all short-term and in what's called current assets because they are readily convertible into cash in the next 1-year period. Now, most accountants would say, your short-term liquidity is short-term assets versus short-term liabilities. And that's oftentimes viewed as being one of like the fastest, like what is the most small picture short-term fastest turnaround to be liquid and able to continue operating. And I'm here to say I've got a number for you that is even more short-term and small picture, that if it's not satisfied, then nothing else really matters. And that is when we take a look at strictly our bank accounts. And by that, I mean literally the cash in your pocket, the cash in your checking account, the cash in your savings account, the credit card that you might have for the business, line of credit that you might have for the business. Like, we're really talking about bank accounts here between cash and credit. And when we take a look at this, we can say, okay, well, what is the sum of bank accounts assets minus liabilities? Well, here we have it. It's net equity, because it's the equity when you balance out assets versus liabilities. And so, wouldn't you know it, if we take a look at this, we can see immediately if we've got $5,000 in cash here, there's this old expression that cash is king. Well, I'm mostly okay with that, but it does nothing to tell us about cash flow, nor does it do anything to tell us about how much trouble we might be in with the liabilities that we have. Because again, if you got $5,000 here and $10,000 on your company credit card, that I do not sleep very easy at night when I'm literally upside down. And I mean, that may not even speak to any of the like investor money that I owe or other loans that I may need to deal with in 3, 6, 9, 12 months from now, maybe a couple years from now if I have to pay some people back. Like, yeah, that's a headache, but what's a bigger headache is when I'm like not even solvent enough to like pay my own credit card at the end of the month. That gives me way more of a headache because I got like maybe 15 days to figure out that equation, whereas maybe I've got 2 years to figure out how to pay back this investor. So that's why, this cash is king. Yeah, that's all right, but it ignores the crucial role of liabilities, including possibly some pretty high interest credit cards. So that's why beyond just cash, beyond just the cash, I want to know, and here comes the magic, bank accounts net equity. And when you put all those 4 letters together, we get BANE. I clearly had way too much fun putting together this presentation. Okay, so I am now going to show you a live spreadsheet where we can kind of go through a little bit of BANE calculations. So I'm just gonna go ahead and clear some of this out, and you're gonna see what's gonna happen. So right off the bat, we're not gonna look at this BANE points just yet. I'm gonna move this right on over. Whoops, I'm gonna move that over. At least I think I'm gonna move it over. There we go. And we're just gonna look at calculating how much breathing room that we have here with BANE. Okay. So let's say I got 150 bucks in my Canadian dollar checking account because I'm a Canadian. Now I also have a US dollar checking account because I spend a lot of time south of the border with our good friends to the south. I got 50 bucks in there. And by the way, I've adjusted the US dollar checking account. I've done all the conversions and it works out to 50 Canadian dollars. So now we're got, apples to apples. So that means total cash on hand is $200. And if I live by the edict of cash is king, I would just look at this and I would say, hey, I'm in good shape. I got 200 bucks in my pocket. Well, I got some unfortunate news. I also have $200 on my credit card. So how much breathing room do I have? Basically zero. My bank, my BANE number is assets minus liabilities. So we got our assets here minus liabilities equals BANE. Bank accounts net equity. Okay, so let's say then from there I get a client, and they pay me like $500. Okay, great. Still got the 50 bucks in the checking account. Total cash on hand. If we just take our the magic of Excel here, we're gonna copy that on down. Check it out. I'm now doing well. 550 bucks. And that credit card, it didn't pay for anything. It didn't buy anything today. It's still at 200. And look at BANE, 350 bucks. Assets minus liabilities equals breathing room BANE of plus 350 is a good day. Okay, so I got this 500 bucks here. And it's the time of the month that I need to pay off my credit card. So instead of having 500 bucks, I'm looking at this credit card and I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to pay that guy down by $200. So this actually goes to $300, down from 5, still at 50 in the US dollar account. Here we go. We're going to auto-calculate this guy here, 350, and because I paid down the credit card, it's at 0. So wouldn't you know it, BANE stayed exactly the same because as my assets went down by $200, so too did my liabilities because I used cash to pay off my credit card, and BANE stays exactly the same. Okay, so I've got 300 bucks here. I've got $50 in the USD checking account, and therefore my total cash on hand is the same as before, 350. I went out though, and I decided it's really important that I get an absolutely smoking Mac computer. 2,000 bucks. Bang. Oof, that hurts BANE. I am negative 1650, and that is not good for me getting some sleep tonight. So a couple days go by, I still got the 300 bucks, still got the 50 bucks here, right? And in fact, that carries on for a couple days. So I'm just going to carry this on down and carry this on down. And this guy's still the same, so it's there. And that BANE number is awfully ugly, negative 1650. My bank account net equity is underwater. It is upside down. So then from there, I finally get a check from a client that I've been waiting on for quite a while. And it's a big check because I did a good bit of consulting. I made $5,000. What a good day. $50 in that account. Look at this cash on hand. It's skyrocketed to $5,050. Visa card's still at 2,000 bucks. And guess what? Our bank account net equity went from negative 1650 to plus 3,050. And whew, I just made it for the end of the month. Now, if we look at kind of like the cash story here, so we're going to say this is 4,000 bucks. We're going to say this is 0. We're going to say this is negative 4,000 bucks. There we go. We're going to get it right this time. So if you look, we started at 0, so we began at 0. Then we went to plus 350, so that's probably somewhere about there. Then we stayed at plus 350. Then, because we bought the computer, we went to negative 1650, so we're all the way down here. We stayed there for 3 days total, and then we went all the way up to 3050. So if I'm feeling like okay here, okay there, I had 3 full days of heart attack, no sleep, before things shot all the way back up. And this right here is like, these are the nights I didn't sleep. This is the red zone. And the more that we've got heart attack red zone below 0, or whatever your comfort level is, that is like actually taking a toll on your health. That's called stress. Okay? And this is why cash on its own is not king. If all I did was say cash is king, and I saw this big $5,000, I'd say, well, hey, everything's okay. And in fact, if all I said was BANE on its own is, at the end of the month, if we just look at end of the month, end of the month, end of the month, end of the month, we would say, well, hey, this is one heck of a good month. We ended the month at $3,050 positive with our BANE. The problem, though, is look at all the roller coaster we went throughout the month. Look at this big heart attack that I had in the middle. I thought this was supposed to be a good month because we ended super high, but guess what? I was sweating bullets and I wasn't sleeping for 3 nights. That's kind of a problem now, wouldn't you say? So to just look at one snapshot in time at cash or at BANE, oftentimes that doesn't tell enough of the story. Instead, I want to know that if we're going to end up here, that's all fine and dandy, but what could I do to change what's happening in here so that I can sleep easy at night and not only make it to the positive 3,050, but not like stress myself out on the way getting there. I got enough stress as an entrepreneur. Got to deal with, customers and occasionally curveballs that come down the pipe from who knows where, right? And I got teammates that I got to show up and be awesome for. Like, I don't need money to be any more of a stress than it sometimes is. So what can we do? To eliminate this pit of despair, I invented a little game. It's called the BANE Game. And look at this. Oops. Hopefully Excel and I will cooperate. There we go. If we take a look at BANE, the BANE Game. Oops. And we take a look, I can get rid of this now, so this doesn't create any confusion. And I can get rid of this as well, so that doesn't create any confusion. Okay, so if we take a look at everything that just happened, and we take a look at the accumulated BANE points, we can see that we finished, we can see that we finished at 1,200, okay, in the red. So I'm just going to make that red so that you can see it. 1,200 right there. I'll make it bold too. So it's just like that. Okay, so consider this to be the placeholder. This is the placeholder reminder of where we were at. And I'll also put a placeholder reminder here of 3050. So you can remember that this is where we ended in the last, in the series of transactions that I told you about here. So I'm just going to highlight that. I'm going to make it green. I'm going to bold it up. And we're going to fill it with a little bit of light green. There we go. Okay, it's a little ugly. It's not the same, but close enough. Just play ball with me here. Okay, so English. There we go. Okay, so we can see that. Actually, I need to explain to you what BANE is first here. So what the BANE Game is every single day when the day ends, we take the number of dollars that you have in the BANE account, and we convert it over to points. When it gets converted over to points, it's no longer dollars, and you really need to understand that. You got to remember, this column is not dollars. It absolutely is not dollars. Okay, it's points. It's like kind of like units of points. That's it. It's not dollars, it's not cents, it's not credit cards, it's not cash. It's just points, okay, as a way to measure our progress. So after the first day, how many points do we have? We've got 0. All right. So far, so good. Making sense to me. In fact, I'm going to even take this column and I'm going to make it no decimal points, just so it's not even tempting to think about it as money. Okay. So then, if we look at the next day, we're going to take what number of points would we have on this day? Well, we'd have actually 350. Right. At the end of this day, we'd have 350. Here we would have negative 1650, right? So none of this seems like rocket science, I'm sure. It seems very obvious, okay? But the BANE game doesn't just take the numbers, it adds them up from one day to the next. And so we see if we go 0 on this day, that's 0 BANE game points. Then the following day is going to be the combination of this day plus that day to give us our BANE score at the end of day 2. So we can see 0 plus 350 actually is 350. So how do we find our BANE score for the following day, for day 3? Well, day 3 is going to be the result at the end of day 2 plus whatever the result was, plus or negative, positive or negative from here, to give us our accumulated BANE game score. So 350 and positive 350 is actually 700. Okay. To find out BANE game day 4, right here, all we do is we combine, just as before, end of day 3 plus BANE score from during the day of day 4 to give us end of day 4 for a total of, it's not 1650, it's 700 minus 1650. So what I'm going to do here to keep this easy on myself, I'm actually just going to set up a calculation. So I'm going to say this day equals the day before plus whatever this is, positive or negative, and it gives us 350. And I'm going to set up the same calculation again so that this day is simply going to be that day plus that day. And so to do that, I can actually just drag this calculation down, and wouldn't you know it, auto-calculates 700. When I bring it down another cell, 700 minus 1650 is negative 950. So I'm actually upside down in my BANE game. Go another day. It's still the same negative 1650 BANE. Like, I'm still upside down by just 1650 and just 1650 and just 1650. This is the same 1650, but every day that I'm upside down, it compounds. It adds itself again and again and again, so that it emphasizes how crappy it is to be upside down. And there you see it. It's negative 4250. And then we come here and we add this. Whoops. I'll just say this. We're going to add this 3050, right? Negative 4250 plus 3050. And it takes us to negative 1200. And there's our number, right? It all adds up. So you can see that this mirrors pretty much exactly, that this is what we saw. Hey, we're above, we're below, we're above. And now we start to see this is the cumulative effect of not managing cash flow, which is money in, money out on a daily basis. So what would it mean to do a better job of managing cash flow? Well, okay, so I'll just remind you, we've got this as a bookmark, right? 1200 is what the result was if we were playing the BANE game for this result of 3050 at the end of the month. Well, okay, here's what we can do. If we decided, instead of buying our Mac computer, which we bought right here, if instead of buying it here, we decided to buy it one day later, what would happen? Okay, so we would have, instead of having a $2,000 expense there, it would be 0 because we're buying it the following day, right? And look what it does. Suddenly our breathing room, our BANE score, went to plus 350 instead of being negative $1,650. What if we decided to wait another day? And instead of buying it on this day, we bought it on this day. Well, we wouldn't be carrying that on our credit card, so this is now 0 again. And this jumped from 1650 to 350. And what would happen if we decided to wait all the way until we got the big check from the client? Remember how this is the day that we were getting the check from the client? Well, if we would have waited, and then this would have been 0 as well, and look, it's an entirely green month. How much heart attack did we have? None. What was the end of the month balance? 3,050, exactly the same as it was before, except we didn't have any heart attacks along the way. And guess what? The BANE game reflects that exactly. Instead of having the 1,200, remember this is the bookmark, 1,200, we're actually plus 4,800 in the BANE game. Now there's another way that we could make this even sweeter on ourselves. Is what would have happened if we would have called that customer, and instead of getting our money on January 31st here, what if we would have got our money a month sooner? Not a month sooner, I'm sorry, a day sooner, a single day sooner. Well, suddenly we got the money not this day, but we got it on this day. And so that meant that we got plus 5,000 BANE points a day sooner. And that bumped us all the way up here in our BANE points, right? In our BANE dollars, and also in our BANE points. And let's say we actually got them to pay not just one day early, but a few days early. And we were just friendly reminders, hey, just letting you know your account's overdue. Any way that we could take care of that today? By getting that earlier, look at this. We are getting 5,000 extra BANE dollars. It's not actually dollars. Our BANE goes up far sooner, which creates an extra 5,000 BANE points every single day. And so if all we did was get paid sooner and hold off on expenses as long as we can, look at what happens to our BANE score. Previously, on the same exact end of month outcome of $3,050, we've, just by managing our cash flow differently, by paying expenses later and avoiding having to pay expenses too soon, and by getting paid as soon as possible, look at this. 0 green squares whatsoever. And not only that, look at how big our BANE balance is. It's huge, which is awesome. And that gets reflected exactly in our BANE points. Look at this. 23,600 instead of the 1,200. Remember, this is our bookmark to say what was it originally. Same exact cash at the end of the month. Same exact credit card at the end of the month, right? Same exact BANE score at the end of the month, except no heart attacks. No heart attacks whatsoever. In fact, this was peaceful and exciting and big and fat, juicy BANE score, or BANE dollars, bank account net equity. And guess what? Our BANE score represents how much we got to sleep at night. 23,600 points instead of 1,200 in the frickin' red. That is BANE, and that is the BANE game. When we take into account not just cash, that old expression, cash is king. Yeah, there's some truth to that. There's no question you need some cash to be able to operate. No question about that whatsoever. However, it's also not enough to just say BANE. Because with BANE, we want to keep it as positive as long as possible and have a nice rich score. Ultimately, though, if we're watching the BANE game, we get to see the net effect of stress or joy in managing this extremely short-term situation. And that's exactly why I invented the BANE game. I've never heard it. I don't know where I come up with this stuff sometimes, but I just kind of think about what is it that keeps me up at night, and what number could I watch if I could only watch one number. What would allow me to sleep easy at night? And this is just what I figured out, is bank account net equity, and the game to play is the BANE game as I've shown it to you here today. It's simple. All I do at the end of each night before I head off to bed is I just quickly log into online banking, throw that into the BANE game, I throw that guy into the BANE game, I throw that guy into the BANE game, And guess what? It all calculates. Now, obviously, if you're an entrepreneur of a big company, maybe you got a chief financial officer, they can do it. If you've got some of the right reporting in place, the right tools in place, maybe it takes them 10 minutes to round it up. But I'll tell you what, if everybody can leave the office knowing that things are safe, then everybody can go home and breathe a little bit. Furthermore, when it comes to teaching your team about the importance of cash flow, if you've decided to open up your books a little bit and share with your team where you're at, you can show them in no uncertain terms the importance of cash flow, and specifically BANE cash flow. And now all of a sudden they can see how, hey, if they take care of accounts receivable a lot sooner, this BANE score goes through the ceiling. They see how if they hold off on buying things until just when they need them, right? So hold off on expenses, then the BANE score can go through the roof. When they see that you're not tying up credit or cash in excessive inventory, this score gets to go way up, which is phenomenal, and thus creating the maximum number of operating breathing room that you have on a weekly and monthly basis. So that is the BANE game. I'm Tim Francis. I invented this thing, and I'm sure somebody far smarter than me invented it before and called it something far more smart sounding than the BANE game. But maybe that's just my incredibly practical, my grandparents both grew up on farms. Maybe that's it too. I don't know. But I'm just, really, really encouraging you to keep an eye on this and to teach it to your team so that they can keep their eye. And you know what? Like I once said, when I was a solopreneur, I said, I want somebody else thinking about my business in the shower in the morning. I've heard other people say, I want other people to lose sleep at night if the company's not doing well, or I want other people to celebrate when the team is doing well. And this right here is an awesome opportunity to be able to do both and really bring your team members in and move them out of quote unquote employee thinking and empower them and raise them up so they can think like owners. Thank you so much for watching. This is Tim Francis, and that is, my friend, the BANE Game.